Awesome. So thanks for joining, everyone. The response to this paper has been amazing. So first and foremost, thanks for all of the feedback we've received. And also a big shout out to all of the incredible people at TikTok and System One who've made this work happen. There was a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration that went into making this possible. So big thank you to you all. And today we're really excited to dive into the findings as well as answer some questions at the end of the session as well. Sorry, one second. So before we do that, let's start with a quick round of introductions. I am Josh Frutiger, VP of Global Partnerships and Thought Leadership at System One, where I get to dive deep on creative effectiveness with lots of brilliant people every day, including, by the way, my colleague Andrew Tyndall, who played a big role in this research and would have been presenting with us today if it wasn't for a very painful wisdom tooth. So please, if you see Andrew or message him, send him your well wishes. We're thinking of him. And then finally, last thing I'll say about myself, before joining System One, I spent 4.5 years on the global marketing team at TikTok, where I had the absolute pleasure of working closely with TikTok's amazing research and insights team, led by the one and only Esteban. So I'll hand it over to him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Josh. My name is Esteban, but the thing that I want to say to all of you is I am on a mission. I want to make advertising more joyful for consumers, but also more rewarding for brands. And partnering with System One is exactly the kind of things or tools or frameworks or activities that allows us to do that, to get a really good understanding of what works on the platform and why it works, and help educate the marketplace on how to do better. Because there is an opportunity to bring back the magic in advertising that may have been lost a little bit over the past couple of years. And we are super excited to share with you some of those learnings that we got precisely about how to do that.
Very well put. Okay, with that said, let's dive into it, starting with some industry context, which kind of explains why we chose to do this research now. So over the past few years, media spend has shifted towards digital and social in a pretty dramatic way as more and more people spend more and more time online. And there was a time when digital was largely synonymous with direct response advertising, right? But clearly something has shifted in recent years. We've seen platforms like TikTok and others invest heavily in the power of brand building. And today we're at the point where marketers largely agree that digital can effectively build brand. And all of that is taking place in skippable media environments where, the average watch time can often just be a few seconds. But at the same time, we have researchers like Karen Nelson-Field talking about, needing at least 2.5 seconds of attention to drive results. So how are brands successfully building their brands in these skippable environments where, we're not forcing someone to watch an ad for 30 seconds? And there's been some incredible work done on this by analytic partners, Havas and Lumen, looking at aggregated attention, right? Not just attention in isolation, but the aggregated effect. And they compared that with roughly 9,000 brand lift studies. And what they found is that even at relatively low levels of average watch time, in some cases below the threshold of 2.5 seconds that Karen laid out, the aggregated effect of this across multiple ads really starts to add up and have a significant impact on brand awareness. This is what Grace Kite and Tom Roach would call lots of littles, if you've heard of that. It's the power of those little exposures adding up to drive something more meaningful. And also thank you to Grace, by the way, who very graciously shared this slide with us. And all of these littles, they ultimately translate into outcomes beyond just brand lift as well, right? They're starting to change the payback picture too. So this chart shows data from ROI Genome, and it's the result from 750 studies across 45 countries, billions in spend. And today we're at the point where these littles in digital video and social are now outperforming linear TV in terms of ROI. And of course, the point of this slide is not to say that TV is dead, right? It's still an incredibly important part of the media mix, but we're clearly entering a different era where we can't just rely on a big TV campaign to do all of the heavy lifting. Clearly, digital and social channels have an enormous role to play across the funnel today. And it's more important than ever to understand how we can maximize effectiveness across the funnel within these channels as a result. And so when we look at full funnel effectiveness, there's been this great bit of research done by Tracksuit and TikTok, which shows that brands with stronger levels of awareness on the platform see significant advantages on performance efficiency. So ultimately, they see much stronger conversion rates. And this really gets to the crux of what marketers need to do in digital and social today, right? They have to build demand while also converting against it. They have to do the long and the short, as Les Binet and Peter Field would say. And I think whilst most marketers understand that they need to do this today, when it comes to how you actually do this from a creative perspective in today's digital landscape and all of the details and all of the guidance around that, we felt that there was still room to dive deeper on this topic, which is exactly why we undertook this research together with TikTok and the partners there. They had the same vision, and we were very excited to do it. And the outcomes have really been very valuable to our teams and the industry so far. So the other thing I want to call out is the work is really built on a foundation laid out by some industry experts, right? We didn't overnight wake up and decide we were going to do this. There's so much work that's gone into this by many other people that we've built on top of, right? Starting with Les Binet and Peter Fields, the long and the short of it. Not only did this inspire the name of the paper, but it also established key principles that are a core part of the work. And then, of course, I have to shout out much of the thinking laid out by System One's Chief Innovation Officer, Orlando Wood. In his two books, Lemon and Lookout, he established principles of showmanship and salesmanship and lots of other things around the hemispheres of the brain that have been absolutely fundamental to how we've approached this. So, looking at the scope of the research, we looked at 8 different markets across the globe, taking 350 brand and conversion lift studies from TikTok. Then we tested the ads from those studies, which amounted to roughly 1,000 ads. We tested those with 90,000 TikTok consumers. And we did all of that with System One's Test Your Ad social products to really understand which creative features are responsible for driving brand and business outcomes in short form video. And for anyone who's less familiar with how brand and conversion lift studies work, you essentially have 2 groups of users. So you have the control group who isn't exposed to the ad or campaign, and then a test group who is exposed, and the uplift between those 2 cohorts is what's being measured, right? And on the brand side, it's a survey which establishes things like, ad recall, brand awareness, brand image or association gains, or intent lift. And on the conversion side, it largely works the same, except rather than a survey, it's the actual action being taken that's the thing that is being measured, right? Things like, or actions like add to cart or purchase, etc. Those are what are being measured as a conversion. And we then took this brand and business outcome data and we combined it with System One's data from the testing we conducted. That's gave us a bunch of different metrics, things like the level of creative attention that the ad garnered, as well as our hero metrics of star rating, which predicts long-term effectiveness, our spike rating, which predicts short-term effectiveness and consideration, our fast fluency score, which tells us the level of correct brand recognition after 2 seconds of watching an ad. And we were also able to understand the types of sentiment that the ads drove, right? So whether they left consumers feeling happy or surprised or sad. And then we even have verbatims that add a bit more color to that as well, right? Where we can start to understand why are consumers feeling those feelings that we see emerging in the data. We can also see which distinctive brand assets are actually being recognized by real life consumers. We can see the spontaneous associations that emerge after watching the ads. And we can also see which creative features are jumping out to consumers most prominently. And that allowed us to do a ton of analysis off the back of it and get to some really interesting findings. And then finally, we did this across a range of creative styles, right? Short form video has a huge breadth of the way that it shows up, and we wanted to make sure that was represented within this. So we looked at creator-led ads. We also looked at what we're calling brand native ads, so ads that were built natively for the platform but don't necessarily feature a creator. And then we looked at brand traditional ads, and that's largely repurposed TVCs for the platform. And when we started this research, there was one thing in particular that we really knew we wanted to look at, and that was the difference between ads that are designed to sell on the one hand, and then ads that are designed to put on a show, ads that entertain. And this distinction is what Orlando Wood coined salesmanship versus showmanship. And interestingly, when you look at this chart that maps the evolution of these 2 features across traditional media, we've seen this gradual shift away from showmanship towards salesmanship over the last few decades. In other words, advertising has become less entertaining over time. And to Esteban's point around regaining the magic, that's exactly what we kind of set out to do in our mission at System One. We want to help advertisers and clients achieve that. So if we think about how we define showmanship and entertainment, there's a whole bunch of characteristics and creative features that can be sort of picked out to define it. It's things like characters acting, a story unfolding, a recognizable sense of place, or something out of the ordinary. In short, it's ads that put on a show, right? It's ads that kind of put the audience first and speak to that System One part of the brain. And to make it a little bit less abstract, I'd love to show you an example of what this looks like in action on TikTok. And it's a snippet from Hilton's famous 10-minute TikTok ad, if you're familiar with that.
No! Good. Don't. But I will. And I'll get those Hilton Honest points. And I can say from personal experience that every stay with Hilton's family of brands is an absolute pleasure. Oh, sorry, are you filming something? Yeah. Is it an ad? No? Oh, no. No, don't do this. Why not? We don't want ads on TikTok. People hate them. No, people on TikTok hate corporations pretending to be people. They love good ads. And ads can be art, just like the plush beds and soft linen at Hilton can make sleeping into an art form. We can't do ads. It's not our thing. I think my new thing is enjoying staying at a Hilton. Is that a watermark? No. Does that mean we can't use the AR filter? Is your head a hotel? Yeah. You sell out. You traitor. You call yourself a writer? An artist? Listen, we're not unworthy of...
There you go. You get the idea. Very, very great storytelling, characters acting, playful, humorous, etc. Just a great example of a great ad. And when we start to then look at how we analyze the data off the back of it, what we found is that when we looked at these showmanship features that I just had on the previous page, and we looked at the ads with the highest level of showmanship features, essentially the most entertaining ads, we saw huge uplifts from these ads in terms of memory, in terms of brand awareness and brand image lift. In short, entertaining ads build brand incredibly well. And that entertainment translates into more positive sentiment measured by System One's star rating, as well as more attention. And they're all kind of feeding into one another, right? The more you entertain your audience, the better they feel about your ad and your brand, and the more they lean in and pay attention. So entertainment clearly is like it's an amazing strategy to build your brand, but then we wanted to look at what actually drives conversion. And that's where we looked at the opposite of showmanship, the opposite of entertainment, if you will, and what Orlando Wood would call salesmanship, ads that are very much designed to sell, ads with a heavy call to action, many words on screen, someone talking directly at you, trying to sell you something. These ads are designed to speak to the rational sort of System 2 part of the brain. And let's take a look at an example of that in action.
95-cent David protein bars are available right now in the TikTok shop for the next 24 hours only. Guys, go and check out the link below to apply your coupons. You guys get over 60% off on these. They have every flavor plus free shipping. Give them a try at this price.
That's a pure salesmanship ad, right? It's trying to get you to buy that product and not really doing much else. And guess what? There's a reason why we see a ton of this type of advertising across platforms. Salesmanship works. It converts, as the data in the study shows. We saw that ads with the highest prevalence of salesmanship features saw an 88% increase in conversion lift. But, and this is a very important but, there is a hidden cost to salesmanship. If we look at the data here, this cost comes at the expense of your brand. So ads that over-index to salesmanship, they saw reduced memory lift, reduced brand awareness, reduced brand image lift. So this kind of gets us to this age-old question, right? Do advertisers have to choose between entertaining their audiences or selling to them, depending on the campaign objective, the thing that they're trying to achieve, right? And for decades, I think many marketers have operated under this perceived trade-off, right? Emotional, entertaining ads build brand over the time on the one hand, and more rational, direct response creative is required to drive immediate sales. And when we look at that same chart, but this time through the lens of showmanship and entertainment, things get quite interesting. As I said before, entertainment builds brand, and we saw that, and this chart shows it. But entertainment also converts. So we saw that the most entertaining ads saw a 50% increase in conversion. But the story gets even more interesting when you start to look at the index numbers at the bottom here. So the index conversion lift for the most entertaining ads was 149. And when we look at the most salesmanship ads, it was 150. So essentially, I mean, that's like a rounding error, right? Entertaining ads are essentially as effective as salesmanship ads at driving conversion, yet at the same time they build your brand alongside it. And what this is essentially telling us is you can kind of have your cake and eat it, right? Selling doesn't have to be transactional. It can put on a show, and when it does, both consumers and brands win. But entertainment alone isn't enough. When we look at System One's database across social platforms, we see something quite interesting and quite important. The average level of fast fluency, so the average level of early brand recognition at 2 seconds of watching an ad, is less than 40%, which is clearly, very important and something we need to pay attention to. Consumers have to know it's you. It can't just be entertainment. It has to be distinctive entertainment. And for that, I will hand you over to Esteban to tell us exactly what that means.
Thank you, Josh. I love the hidden cost of salesmanship. It is something we actually don't see. And part of the fact that it is hidden is many of the ways in which we optimize our media, in which we make decisions to optimize creative, is not seeing at that. It's only seeing at the results that we care, the conversions and all of that. And that's good. It took us where we are, but it doesn't get you to see all of the unintended consequences of doing that. Fortunately, with this kind of findings, we have a way to say, and hopefully to bring back the idea that you can do both. There is no compromise. You have to entertain, but at the same time, you have to, you can sell and you can entertain. But as Josh is saying, it's not just entertaining for the sake of entertaining. What is distinctive entertainment? You can go to the next slide, Josh. So at the end of the day, really, these are ads that are successfully entertaining. They are congruent with the goal of the consumer when they are on the platform. That's the first thing that you need to do. You need to make sure that you are helping the consumer do what they wanted to do when they launch a TikTok session. It's not about interrupting them. We cannot interrupt them. It's a swipeable format. So if they don't want to see you, they just swipe you. That's good. But that also creates a very, very different environment for how you brand. The traditional ways of thinking about branding an ad no longer works in short form video, in skippable formats in particular. Because if you think about this, at every second of an ad, a consumer is asking a question, is this worth watching my time? Because they have the choice. We give it to them to watch it or not. We are not forcing them, so they don't have to wait. They can just do it. So that's a question they're asking. And if we don't deliver on that question, something that keeps them watching for the next second, and then they have the same question again, we are failing. So entertainment is a must. But at the same time, we need to deliver something of commercial value in every of those seconds. And so waiting to brand until you have gathered enough attention, until the storyline has built a little bit, it's actually a mistake because people might be already paying attention to you. There's a high quality of attention in short form video because of the immersive environment, and you're missing the opportunity to deliver something of commercial value. So distinctive entertainment are ads that successfully brand early, but also branding early doesn't mean it's a one size fits all, it's just slapping your logo. There are a bunch of nuances here. But if you go to the next slide, Josh, what I wanted to show is, yes, entertainment is an imperative. And you're a big brand, you can somehow bank on your brand equity. It's more easy for people to recognize who you are. And yet, when you actually do proper distinctive entertainment, there is a massive increase in brand lift. But the key thing is when you look at what happens to challenger brands, and that's the next slide, Josh, when we also see again this double jeopardy for a challenger or a smaller brand, which they thrive on the platform, given our discovery or our power to drive discovery. What happens with those brands is that they get heavily penalized if you are not entertaining. And somehow you don't have that chance to rely on your equity, and somehow you're already established presence. But when you do distinctive entertainment, things shift. Things shift dramatically, and that's the key here. So if you are a challenger brand and you properly do distinctive entertainment, this is your ticket to success. See the amount of increase in brand lift in things like brand image or brand awareness. When you entertain while being distinctively recognizable, you are winning. You are actually in the same playing field now that the big category leaders. So if you're a challenger brand, this is a warning call. You cannot get away with not doing distinctive entertainment, but also this is the invitation for you. If you do it, you are playing in the big leagues. And TikTok is an amazing, amazing platform to drive discovery. This is why you see brands, sometimes smaller brands, popping up and becoming sudden success, products falling off the shelf, running out of supply, because people start discovering them, recognizing them through distinctive entertainment. Can you go to the next slide? We see one of the ways to do this, and we see this in the industry moving here, is precisely to rely on creators. Because, I mean, you see companies like Unilever saying, like, you know what, 50% of our ad spend will go to social media. And we're going to probably spend 20 times more with creators. Because they know, and we know, that creator-led advertising is the one that plays best in our environment. But there is a trade-off and there is a myth. And I think this is where I think we are now at the point in the industry where we need to recognize this. Creators do drive more attention. That's why we like them. That's because they tend to be congruent with the consumer's goal when they launch the platform. So they are there to capture attention. They are there to deliver that you want, which is great. And you can see the difference between the levels of attention that you get from a traditional ad that has been fit for the environment. It works. When you have assets that are tailor-made for the platform, it also works. You get a little bit more because it gets more closer to the environment and the expectation that consumers have. When you have the creator, that's the type of content you came here to look. So creator-led advertising is content that people want to see. That's the magic. Yet, we go to the next slide. Here's the trade-off that we start seeing. Yes, creators do drive a lot more attention, but half of the brand, of the early brand recognition. I think I have a reason to believe, or a hypothesis for why this is happening. Creators develop their expertise on the platform to deliver content that people want to see because they are authentic, because it feels like someone like you, because it doesn't feel like they are selling. So entertaining is their core feature, but they have learned or assume that if they start showing up the brand too early, it will lose their authenticity. They will show us if they are selling themselves off to a brand. And so what they tend to do is they hide the brand. So they start saying, watch this. This is going to be amazing. This is going to change your life. Wait for it. I have this thing that really makes a difference for you. I can keep you like this forever, and I haven't shown anything about the brand. But what they tend to do is they hide the brand. They keep all of their interesting, authentic ways of working with you. And suddenly, boom, here is the ad, and here's what it is. And then you realize this is an ad. That, first of all, violates the expectations of the consumer, which is not good. But second, it's always not very clear, is this an ad or is this a content or a regular user-generated content? And consumers expect ads to be ads. So they don't like to be confused about, is this an ad or not an ad? And what we have found is, this is really important, is branding early is actually not a detractor of attention. It is not. Branding early properly keeps levels of attention. But what it really does is it has a massive, massive, massive impact on your brand building capability. Look at this. Even for all these three types of assets, when you do exceptionally early branding, so when you really do it properly, the impact on brand awareness goes like to the roof, 2 times more. For creator-led ads, it goes even higher. But also for brand image, look at that difference. So when you have a creator-led ad that is properly or exceptionally well branded, it's almost 3 times higher the impact that you can have when you do it right. So this is the challenge we have as an industry right now, is we need to educate our creators on how to brand early properly. Because if you start to impose your brand codes, if you start to impose your traditional playbook for branding, that won't work with creators because it goes against the very same thing that makes them valuable, and also what they will fight for at all costs is their authenticity. You don't want to impede their authenticity. So you need to work with them. You need to collaborate with them. You need to educate them so they can know your brand in and out, and they can find a way to brand early. If you impose it on them and it doesn't feel authentic, it's not going to work. But you need to teach them and educate them on how to do it properly. And that's something that Josh might going to speak a little bit more about it.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, there's a huge opportunity laid out by creator ads in general, and when you can get this piece right, the sky's the limit, as you saw there. And I think to Esteban's point, it's like there are the examples that you're seeing on that chart are the examples where they've done it, and they've done it incredibly well, right? And so they've found a way to maintain that authenticity and get all of the brand lift results that come from having the brand baked into the story. And we then get naturally the question of what does this look like? How can we actually effectively achieve this? And I think this is an area that we're very excited to have been able to dive deeper on. And it brings me to one of my favorite charts from the whole study, where we looked at which distinctive brand assets, when present in the first 2 seconds of an ad, drove the highest levels of attention, and then also which assets, highest and lowest, sorry, that's what you see on the horizontal axes. And then we also saw which brand assets drove the highest and lowest levels of correct brand recognition. And what emerges out of this is really interesting. So logos, and by logos, I mean logo overlays, right? As Esteban said, like slap a logo on it, which we can see in the top left quadrant. They're incredibly good at driving brand recognition. People recognize them, they recognize its logo, they recognize the brand, but they also come with this real trade-off when it comes to attention. And I think in part that's driven by something that happened many years ago in our industry, right? In the early days of platforms, they had a bunch of data that showed that the average ad isn't watched for more than a few seconds by most consumers. Now, of course, there'll be some that watch for longer, but on average, that's the way it looked. And so the guidance went, brand early, make the most of the watch time you have, and that makes sense largely. But what ended up happening as a result is that a ton of advertisers did just slap a logo in the first few seconds, right? And they were kind of done with it. They ticked that box. And I think consumers then became somewhat conditioned to ignore those ads. And that's kind of what we see play out in the data here. When you look at the top left, logo overlays help consumers the brand, but then they keep scrolling because that brand asset hasn't provided any type of hook to keep them watching, right? It's lazy branding, to Esteban's point. It isn't trying to sort of build for the consumer and add that value and add that magic. And what I love about this chart is it shows how branding can actually be a hook. It's not a zero-sum game of brand, they realize it's an ad and they scroll past it. You can actually brand and hook and maintain attention with that. So if we look at the top right quadrant, things like branded music or jingles, or the fluent device, like brand characters, or even just a simple change of logos in context. So logos which are integrated into the story itself. Not only can these assets drive recognition, but they actually keep consumers watching. And this brings me to another one of my favorite charts of this study, where we're able to see how that combination or the kind of tension, if you will, between early brand recognition and the subsequent attention actually translate, and sorry, that the early brand recognition and subsequent attention of specific brand assets, how that actually translates into real world brand awareness games. I think, back in the day, it was, or even traditionally, it was always this, you had sort of two perspectives, right? On the one hand, you'd have people saying you need to brand early, this is a must. And then the other hand, you'd have people saying, well, it's going to kill attention, it kills authenticity. And the debate between those two was somewhat binary. What we've done here is taken both of those, mapped it to the actual, like the combination of those, mapped it to the actual brand awareness outcomes, and we start to get a really, really clear picture. So as you can see, sonic assets, brand jingles, music, etc., that wins time and time again, and it's something that often goes underutilized in advertising. But if we look at logos, that's where things start to get quite interesting as well. So a standard logo overlay, which you can see at the bottom here, that doesn't perform very well on awareness, right? It's quickly recognized, consumers scroll past it. It doesn't garner the necessary attention to maintain or drive brand awareness. But if you look at the inverse of that, at the top of the chart, if you look at logos in context, logos that are integrated into the story, perhaps they're part of a product, they're part of the ad itself and the story, and they add value, suddenly brand awareness can go through the roof. And let's take a look at an example of that in action so you can see what we're talking about here and kind of grasp it a bit better.
Hey, this is Adam Brody. I'm on set with Pringles. I'm going to be passing the phone to someone whose mustache can expertly work a table saw.
Hey, this is Nick Offerman, and I'm passing the phone to someone who has a mustache so strong, people think it's a beard.
Hey guys, it's James Harden, and I'm passing the phone to the most iconic mustache in the snack aisle.
Amazing ads. That was part of their Super Bowl campaign where Pringles had the actors from their TVC do this pass the phone challenge that was popular on TikTok at the time. And what's really clever about this is that they made the Pringles can this central device to the story, right? And not only is the Pringle can and the Pringles man, it's an incredibly strong and distinctive brand asset with tons of equity, but it's also brought to life in a way that makes consumers feel good about the ad and the brand. And we actually saw that in the System 1 data as well, which you can see up here. It effectively drove positive sentiment, whilst at the same time, it remained highly recognizable, with 84% of people recognizing that it was a Pringles ad after 2 seconds. So people recognized it was Pringles. They felt good about the fact they recognized it was Pringles because the Pringles was adding value to their viewing experience and correctly telling them this is an ad, but hey, it's an entertaining ad, and people stuck around as a result and they enjoyed it, and the results speak for themselves. So with all of that said, we've kind of touched on the importance of entertainment, right? We've covered the importance of being distinctive within that entertainment, as Esteban said, and we've kind of looked at some of the tactics you can use to get there. But with that said, we also wanted to talk about the role that frequency plays within the context of creative effectiveness. It's a topic that comes up a lot within the industry. And for that, again, I will hand you over to the master, Esteban, to take us home on this.
Thank you, Josh. Look, there is this question. The question behind this question really is, can we muscle our way in? As advertisers, can we just put more money behind this? Can we just make the ads, repeat the ads, and then eventually we'll get the gains? It's not a bad assumption in some ways. And when we are asking advertisers to produce a ton of content, because these platforms do benefit from a high volume of content, high volume of assets, then one natural solution is, well, let's just keep putting a bunch of ads. Some might be good, some might not, but then we just muscle our way in with frequency. Will that work? And so we did part of this study, a deep dive on the dynamics of fatigue and frequency and how things work. And here's the first thing that I want you to take away from this. The frequency, the brand building potential of a campaign or of an ad does compound with time, with frequency, which is great. It's actually consistent with what we have been saying in the industry is be consistent, run your good ads for long, they will compound over time. And this is exactly what we are seeing here. So let me explain the chart for a second. So we take ads that have differing star ratings from the get-go in the first impression. So naturally, you will have a distinction there. And then we start exposing users to that same ad. And then we measure again the star rating. What you see, first of all, is that a bad ad is a bad ad, no matter how much you put or you repeat it. No matter how much frequency you put behind a bad ad, it will remain a bad ad. And that is completely waste of money and effort. But if you put that same effort behind a really good ad, look what happens after some heavy exposure. You get 9 times more the impact of a really bad one, which a really bad one is basically short getting not inset. But you are multiplying almost by 3 the impact of a really good ad to start with. So yes, you can repeat, you can use frequency to compound the effect, but only if you have good quality ads. Ads that are entertaining, ads that are distinctively recognized early on by the consumer about the brand. This is brand building. And so you do have the chance and the opportunity to build brands on TikTok and short form video. Is really the same principles. Compound consistency with good creative, you will get the results that you used to get in other channels. You can build brands on short form video. Next slide, please. What happens with short-term impact? Does it change with frequency? Here, let me explain this chart. It's a little bit more difficult to explain, but what we do here is we divide the ads that had a short-term spike rating, something that was good for short-term brand building. And we divide it into quartiles. So we have those that are poor, those that are somehow good, those that are great, and those that are best. We take that classification, so we take those ads, keep them in that classification, and then we run them through heavier levels of exposure and see what happens. Does it change anything? Unlike the brand building effects that compound over time, there is no big change for short-term impact. This kind of makes sense. Short-term is meant to bring in consumers who are in the market, who are already there. The ones who were in the market, the ones who saw your ad, the ones who went through the motions of picking up, doing a transaction, doing something are gone. They are not going to buy again. So the more you repeat in front of them, it's not going to do much. But you're still going to have a finite number of individuals that are in the market for it. But a bad ad will be a bad ad, and it won't capture the amount of demand that is out there, even if the demand is still there and people are in the market for it. So now you cannot muscle your way in for short-term sales with frequency. You cannot. In fact, the first impression is everything, and making it count. If you did something really good the first time the ad was shown, that is a good ad. Keep repeating it. It will build your brand. If it is entertaining, if it is pure salesmanship, it will still convert, but it won't give you the brand building effects, which will be a miss. Why would you want to do that when you can get both with brand building? But if it is a bad ad, forget it. It's just basically wasting the money. And you go to the next one. Because here's, to me, the main takeaways that I want you all to get from here. One, in short form video, where consumers are expecting to be surprised. So they have an expectation that they are going to be surprised. They don't know what they're going to be surprised by what. That is what keeps them so into the experience, is so immersive. So you need to deliver content that people wants to see, that kind of content that will surprise, that will entertain. So entertaining is really a strategic imperative if you want to win in short form video. And the good thing is that you can bring back the magic. You can do both things. You can entertain, you can build a brand, and you can drive the short-term sales that you need to drive. Why would you get away with just selling the short and not building the brand when you can do both by being congruent with consumers and helping them do what they want to do in the first place? So that's the first thing. The second thing that we want to you to take away with this is that early and effective branding is actually not a tax on attention. We have data, we didn't show it here in particular, but well-branded, well early branded ads are not compromising on attention, because a well-branded early branding ad makes the ad part of the story, part of the reason, sorry, the ad, the product or brand, part of the reason you want to keep watching. It's not opportunistic. It's not that you are entertaining with something and then you have the logo here or you have the product here. No, you are making the product part of the hook, part of the reason you want to keep watching the longest. And in that case, it's not a compromise on attention. In fact, it actually is a dividend. It supercharges, and it charges creator-led ads. This is the most important, valuable tool that we have nowadays in the industry, is to leverage creators, because they have something unique that no other type of asset can, but you need to not kill their authenticity. You cannot impose your brand codes the traditional way. You have to collaborate with them. You have to co-create with them. You have to educate them to really understand your brand so they can authentically include it in their stories. And the third and very last piece here, right now it feels like everyone can make an ad. You don't need a huge production. You don't need a huge amounts of budget. You don't need a huge amount of time. It's easy. You can create an ad. Everyone can do it. But that doesn't mean that you can't go cheap on quality, that you can't just simply muscle your way in, produce a bunch of things and see what sticks. The ads that, or the brands that make creative quality another strategic imperative, are the ones who will win. This is, to me, the main takeaway for all of you. Yes, you can somehow game the system by putting up a ton of content on the platform. The contents reward newness, because as human beings, we are curious to understand something that is new. But you need to deliver something new in the familiar to compound. That's one. But second, quality is not left to chance. You need to put your best people at quality. Quality is not cheap, meaning the thinking that you put on making a good ad still require, no matter what, good talent, good time, good thinking, good creativity. You cannot muscle your way in by simply putting more ads on it. So there you go. And to me, the most, one thing that you can do is share this with your creators. Educate them, share this, let them know that branding early, if done properly, is not against their authenticity and is not against their attention. In fact, it will just reward them more, and you will come with more money behind for them. That, to me, is the main takeaway. And now we have the opportunity to bring back the magic in advertising, give consumers what they want to get, while also being effective and rewarding the brands that are doing it. So that's what we wanted to share with you. We hope this was insightful. And Josh, any comments, final comments on your end before we answer some questions?
I think you summarized it perfectly. And there's a few questions that kind of speak to some of these things. So I would say let's jump into a few of those. We have the QR code for the paper itself as well. I've seen a number of questions around like methodology and that kind of thing. It's probably easiest to just go and look at the paper on the methodology slide, and you can see exactly how we're defining things like frequency, etc. There's an interesting question from Aurora, who said, very interesting, we're about to test different ways of how we apply branding in our ads versus always using the logo. With creator assets, do you have any tips for having assets that feel social native, especially with creators, but do the job for brand building as well? So first thing I'll say is, this is an area that we're very interested to dive deeper on. We're actually exploring doing some more work on it. So there might be some more detailed pieces to come. But I would also say that chart shows that there are a number of different ways. So when we say logo in context, right, one of the easiest way for creators to brand an ad is to actually leverage the product which has branding on it and try and make it part of the story. So that was one that very clearly jumped out. But I would say there is a ton. It's really dependent on your brand, your strength of distinctive brand assets, things like brand characters. I hate to always flag Duolingo as an example, right? But they've made a brand character incredibly native within social environments, and it's highly effective. There's many different ways you can use sonic assets and jingles, etc. So I would say there are a ton. That top right-hand quadrant is where your sweet spot is likely going to be, but of course that will vary based off your particular brand and the strength of your assets and the style of ad that you want to be creating and your objectives as well. I know Esteban had a couple of questions that we had asked before that we can answer too. There was also a question on the number of distinctive brand assets, and we actually have this in the research too, but for the purpose of time, we left it out. But what we found, and we have a really interesting chart on this, is that as the number increases, you start to get better outcomes on things like awareness. But equally, there is also this attention line that we have. And if you start to kind of completely overload the ad, right? So once you get to sort of 6, 7 brand assets in the first few seconds, consumers are going to get a little bit confused. And we see that the attention started to drop off, as did the awareness as a result. So the sweet spot tends to be around 3 to 4 brand assets in the first 2 seconds, which again can sound like a lot. But actually, if you think about the fact that brand assets can be both visual and audio, it's much easier than you might think, right? That can be someone mentioning the brand name, for example. That can be a sonic asset. That can also be then something visual at the same time. So that was something that jumped out in the research. I'll take a look at some more of the questions, but in the meantime, I know there was some asked beforehand. So Esteban, do you want to jump to some of those?
Sure. Thank you, Josh. Look, this is a question that we get often with kind of our recommendations to refresh content frequently. How do we ensure that we maintain creative quality and brand consistency? So look, in short form video, brands often feel kind of caught between 3 competing demands. So you have demands for more content, demands for better content, and demands for varied content. And it may seem like a trade-off, but the truth is, it's a shift of mindset. This isn't a trade-off. It's more of a design challenge. Short-form video really delivers high-quality attention. I mean, this is what makes short-form video so powerful. It's like, I think, and we have research about this, it's like you are playing a highly anticipated mobile game. It's that kind of experience, the one you have. It's like you're super into it with all your senses in it, audio, which is why some of those jingles and some of the distinctive sonic branding works, because the experience is so auditive, so immersive, so full senses, and it's fast and efficient. So in some ways, it gives you the opportunity or the environment that where you don't need high frequency to drive impact. Just a few exposures of the right creative can really move the needle. But because users burn through content quickly, creative refresh really becomes essential. And yes, you have to refresh your creative frequently. So you need variety. That's the solution to it, is create some variety to make sure that you have always something fresh. But variety, first of all, is one way to avoid repeating yourself, but the idea is to reinvigorate your message. And that doesn't mean abandoning consistency. That's the challenge now, is in fact, consistency compounds. We know that, we have seen that. And the brands who are doing it well, the brands who are winning, are the ones who deliver something new, but that is still unmistakably them, is building on what they have always been saying, is a different take on it, is a refresh, but it is compounding and is not changing, is not a completely different campaign. It's just refreshing the same idea, the same good ideas. If it is a bad idea, forget about it. No, you're not gonna muscle your way in, but that's really important. So think about it this way. Quality is really non-negotiable. That's the thing you cannot really get away with. A bad ad is still a bad ad, no matter how many you make. Variety helps you stay fresh, and that is really good, but it should be new within the familiar. That is also really important. That's how you maintain somehow the distinctiveness without becoming repetitive. And consistency builds the brand memory, but too much sameness, if you are not varying it enough, kills the engagement. So think about this not as asset productions, like not how I can make from this same piece many different versions. Yes, you can do that, and that might be the practical way of doing it, but think more about a creative architecture. Think about a way to design modular distinctiveness. What I mean by this is assets that evolve, but they stay on brand. Emotional storytelling, ads that have emotion in it. That's the key thing. One of the things, the big findings from this research is dull is the enemy. That's the thing that really kills you here, is not having any emotion. Even a bad emotion is better than no emotion, because you want people to get them to feel something. That's what they come to the platform. They want to get entertained. They want to uplift their mood. If you are dull, it's like you did not exist. So really try to find ways to bring the emotion to it. But this idea of modular distinctiveness is make the assets evolve, make sure that you have the emotions there, fresh perspective on it, and some meaningful repetition. That's really the balance. And I will finish with this, I guess, is like, you really need to put your best talent on this. In a world where content is now, content is constant now. It's like, it's not it's ever present. So creative excellence is just a business imperative. It's not really just a nice to have. The old ways of thinking about, I'm going to put my best talent to the big brand asset that goes on TV, and then I'm going to find how to execute that on social, and then you create this, and then you leave it to a second tier team that will do the activation. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. And as Josh showed you early, when you do a lot of these littles, the compounding effect is much bigger or as good as the old ways of building brands. So yes, again, you can build brands on TikTok, but you have to do it when you put your best talent, effort, and creativity to creative quality. It really is a must and is the ticket to success. That's the type of question that we tend to always get, Josh.
Agreed. And just to double click into one final thing that you said there, I heard you mentioning about the sort of the cost of dull, right? And one of the questions that came in from Alec was, brands have been nervous about comedy recently as they fear causing offense, but comedy is hugely entertaining. How does comedy perform in short form social brand world? What we saw in the study and what we get from the System 1 tester ad social data is we get all of the types of sentiment, and then we also get types of happiness, and humor is one of those types that we see come out. And time again, it's been proven that humor is incredibly effective within advertising. So as a strategy, making consumers laugh, making them feel good about your brand is always going to be a good approach if you can successfully execute it and it fits your tonality as a brand, obviously. But the other thing is, there are different emotions that come out and play, right? And the very worst of all of those is neutrality. So System 1 partnered with Adam Morgan and Peter Field on a piece of work called The Extraordinary Cost of Dull, where they basically showed that a lot of advertising just leaves consumers kind of feeling nothing, right? And actually, we shouldn't always be afraid of making consumers feel something, especially when you get down the funnel into performance and short-term outcomes. Making someone feel something more intensely, it doesn't just have to be happiness, it can also be a very effective way of actually driving an effect. So the biggest enemy that we have in advertising is indifference, right? And to Esteban's point, you're trying to give someone a reason to pay attention, to keep watching in skippable environments. The last thing you want them to do is feel indifferent to what you as a brand and what you're trying to communicate to them. So I think that's a good place to leave it on. It's kind of a through line of a lot of what we've been saying. And yeah, thank you to Esteban. Thank you to everyone that's dialed in for this. This will be recorded, so for anyone that couldn't make it, we will share out a video of that afterwards. And yeah, thanks for all the feedback. Keep it coming. And if anyone hasn't downloaded the paper, now is your last chance to click on or scan the QR code. With that said, I think we will end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.